Hello and good morning or good afternoon everyone, depending on where you are joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Chance Millet Bangs from Business Review Webinars and I will be your host. It is our pleasure to have Parker Domnick Hunter with us today, who will be discussing is standardization possible in a custom single-use world. Today's guest speaker is Guy Matthews, Market Development Manager at Parker Domnick Hunter. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar platform On24. This webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect, please click the link you received via email to rejoin the session. All of the icons along the bottom of your screen are the interactive widgets that we have on offer today, so please interact with them all throughout the session. You can ask your questions at any point by using the question box or by using the Q&A widget, and we will try and get through as many as we can once the presentation has concluded. You may also get in touch directly with Parker Domnick Hunter by using the Contact Us widget and view or download some additional resources located in the light green resource list widget. Please use the yellow help widget if you experience any technical difficulties or require any further assistance. But without further ado, please allow me to welcome Guy. Guy, over to you.
Thank you, Chance. Hello and welcome to this, the latest in the series of webinars from Parker Domnick Hunter. The other webinars in this series are available on our website. The web address will be displayed at the end of this presentation. I would encourage you to visit the website as it has recently been updated with a lot of new content. Today's webinar is entitled, Is Standardization Possible in a Custom Single-Use World? The learning objectives for this webinar are presented here. We will discuss how and why a design process can become protracted and how that can potentially negatively impact on a project. I will talk about the opportunities for standardization and how this can benefit the implementation of single-use technology, with the ultimate aim of creating more robust single-use systems and supply chains to support single-use implementation in biopharma manufacturing. Single-use technology has been with us for just over 20 years. It started out as a simple bag for holding buffers or cleaning solutions. Over time, single-use has evolved and developed to such an extent that it is now possible to run an entire process in a single-use format. The benefits of single-use have been widely discussed and are well understood. Some examples of these points are on the screen. One of the key benefits that is often mentioned is speed to market. The speed that it refers to comes from the quicker build time for facilities, faster turnaround times between batches, and lower validation requirements as you have eliminated the need for time-consuming cleaning and sterilization validation. Single-use technology is enabling products to be brought to market faster and more safely than ever before. However, there are still challenges for single-use, which leads us to our first poll question. So back to you, Chance.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Guy. So it is now time for our first polling question. Now you can pick more than one option here, so please make sure that you pick all of the answers here that are relevant and then press submit to log your response. So this first question is, what challenges do you still see in single-use implementation? Do you see time to implement as a challenge, scalability, validation requirements, cost, or your final option here is automation? So again, please select all of the options here that are relevant and then press submit to log your response. So I'm just going to give you a few more moments to vote in this poll and then we'll move on to view some results. Okay, thank you to everyone that's responded so far in this poll. Let's move on and view the responses. So it does seem that we have quite an even spread across the board there, Guy. Is that what you was expecting from this poll?
Yes, I mean those results are certainly interesting, and they kind of reflect some of the discussions we're having at Parker Dominick Hunter about where we should be focusing our resources as we look to further develop our single-use offering. If we now start to look at the single-use market, what has the message to end users been over the years? In essence, it has been have a customized solution for every unit operation, for every scale, for every product. That was, and to some extent still is, a very attractive proposition, given the experience of working with fixed stainless steel facilities, where changes to the plant involved engineering works and the resulting revalidation would incur some hefty costs, both in terms of time and money. But this flexibility, achieved through the proliferation of designs for single-use assemblies, has led to some drawbacks and some challenges for the implementation of single-use. For example, there was a report of one biopharma organisation having over 2,000 different assemblies in use, although it must be said, through rationalisation, this was subsequently reduced by about 80%. Such high levels of customisation also mean that organisations have to stock and control a large number of low-volume items, including managing and writing off, where necessary, expired stock. Another challenge is that lead times for products are increased by the need to have lots of small volume production runs. Like any facility, there is a requirement for a changeover process in between products. So having to do that more frequently to accommodate small batches will lead to increased lead times. There are potential quality challenges as the larger the production run, typically the lower the error rate when compared to small production runs of complex assemblies involving custom parts. Although these errors should be caught by the vendor's quality systems, they will still result in increased lead times as rejected products either need to be reworked or manufactured from new. Ultimately, higher costs will result due to the time required for designing, testing, and the management of single-use systems. All these factors will add up to longer implementation times and potentially higher cost of goods. So why is customization a challenge, and how does it lead to longer implementation times? Well, imagine a scenario where you have a project running and a need is identified. The solution to that need is a customized solution that may involve a part that has not been used in an assembly before. So the end user approaches a single-use system supplier. Now, as much as a vendor wants to support their customer, there is a bar over which any item must get before it can be built into an assembly, and gathering this information can take time. As a bare minimum, we would need to know that the product is safe to use, is gamma stable, and has the right quality documentation available. Then, as a supplier, we should ask, is the supply chain robust? Is it able to deal with the demand of going from a low-use item, for example, in a process development facility, where maybe one or two is used every other week for a short period of time, to one used in full-scale GMP manufacturing, where the demand could be several devices per week over a sustained period of time. We should also be asking, does it fit with the manufacturing capabilities of the site? Or to put it another way, is the site equipped to handle the components being designed into an assembly? And finally, the management of parts and components, not only to ensure the timely supply, but also to minimize waste. For example, if there is a minimum order quantity, how does that fit in with the demand for an assembly? If a new device is needed to solve an issue in the process, then these challenges can be and are regularly addressed, but the end user should be aware that this does take time, and that time may not be included in a project plan. Ultimately, all these things can be addressed or managed in such a way that it enables single-use assemblies to be manufactured in a robust and repeatable process in the quantities needed. From an end-user perspective, customization presents the challenge of timely design, testing, and sign-off. If the device being designed is process critical, there may be several people or departments that need to have a say in the design and the review process, and this can all take time. Whereas a pre-configured system would have an easier approvals process, as people reviewing it are familiar with the design and the build, which would raise fewer questions during that process. Next is the issue of training. A highly customized item working well in a process development environment may not be well suited to a production environment. For example, does it require specialist knowledge or training for its use? If so, that would require the training to be rolled out to a number of people to cover all the different shifts, and then ensuring the right expertise is available to support the process at all times. Lead times will potentially be a challenge for a small number of custom items, especially when the number of pieces ordered matches the number of items needed, as this leaves no room for unplanned extra batches that are sometimes required due to contamination or other failures. So how do you get those extra 1 or 2 items needed in time when the lead time is over 12 weeks and has a minimum order quantity of 10? Incoming checks specified and performed on a large number of small batches of material, even if it's only a C of A check, will delay the availability of those systems. It is clearly quicker and easier to check 1 lot of 50 items than check 5 lots of 10. So, what is the solution? Standardization, or as we prefer to think of it, configuration within a design space. This famous quote from Henry Ford is how many facilities were. It was a case of, we can take any process so long as it fits, or we can make it fit into our facility. But then single use came along and increased dramatically the flexibility of manufacturing facilities. And it did this by allowing process-specific customization to take place without the need for costly and time-consuming engineering works. We are not proposing what Henry Ford said. In fact, the days of a process being made to fit into a plant should be long gone. However, lessons can be learned from the automotive industry, where literally hundreds of different cars can be built on the same production line based around a standard configurable package. To carry the analogy further, the resulting car can be used by many different people, and the people building it have the right skills, but they are not reliant on specialist knowledge. The process to build and maintain that car, the car that is being produced, is well understood, and while it does require training, is not at a super specialist level based on years of experience. There will always be a need for configured solutions, but it should not be so process-specific or highly customized that it relies on some form of special knowledge to manufacture the assemblies that are used in a process. The end user will always own the process being run, but the single-use supplier is responsible for ensuring the product is fit for purpose, not only from a performance and regulatory point of view, but also ensuring it can be manufactured at the same quality and timeline today, tomorrow, and in years to come. So as an industry, we should move away from custom solutions to configured solutions based around a validated design space. If we're willing to make that compromise, what could we gain? Three things: time, performance, and quality. Time. When speed to market is key, time spent refining drawings, waiting for samples, and then ultimately final product is time that's simply not available to a project. It would be better spent working through the process development cycle or making the product in question. So we should look to make this process as time efficient as possible. Performance. Prior to implementation, you need to know that the systems are compatible with the solutions being used. They will meet the characteristics required for flow at a certain temperature and pressure for a certain processing time, while having confidence that the supplier knows how to build the assembly and it is supported by a robust supply chain. Too often delays are caused not by manufacturing capacity, but by the availability of components. Quality. Any material used needs to meet the quality profile with the right documentation in place to support it prior to it being included in any design. You cannot do this without some controls being in place around how something is designed, built, and tested. These controls should ultimately lead to the development of the design space from which assemblies are built. In essence, as the end user, you keep your focus on developing your process or making your product rather than designing single-use assemblies. Which now leads me over to poll question number 2. Back to you, Chance.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So it is now time for our second poll question. Again, you can pick more than one option here, so please select all of the options that you agree with and then press submit to log your response. So this question is, what should be standardized? Should it be tested in documentation, design, for example, standard lengths and fittings, the materials, for example, fluid contact layers, or finally how an assembly is built, for example, with connectivity? So yeah, just pick all of the options that are relevant for you here and then press submit to log your response. While you're voting in this poll, I'd just like to remind you that there are some resources available for you to view and download in the light green resource list widget, including a few links to Parker Domnick Hunter websites. So please view those when you get a moment. So let's move on to view some results from this second poll question. Okay, so there seems to be two kind of front runners there with testing and documentation and materials. Guy, is this the kind of response you was expecting from this poll?
Yes, it is. I mean, there's quite a broad range there with, as you say, two clear front runners. I think, the message there is there is a broad scope for standardization, and as an industry, we've probably got a lot of work to do. But if I look at one of the items answered, which is testing and documentation, this slide contains the typical quality attributes for single-use systems. If you look at this table, there are tests on there that are well defined, as they have reference points, for example, the USP, as in the case of particulates or endotoxin. But there are others here which are less well defined, for example, leak testing. The leak testing and how it is done is something that's being developed by different vendors with regards to when the test should be done, what pressure the testing should be performed at, what a fail looks like, and what a pass actually means. If we carried out a survey of different organisations' approaches to these two sets of tests, namely endotoxin and leak testing, we'll see quite an interesting set of results. A, B, C and D represent 4 different vendors active in the single-use market, all with a different approach to these two tests. On endotoxin, some organisations are monitoring samples from the production facility. For others, it forms a part of batch release, while for others it was addressed during process validation. So although the test itself is well defined, where it is implemented and what that means can actually differ. A similar spectrum can be seen for leak testing. Although there is no USP standard here, we see these tests being carried out with claims against them appearing on certificates of analysis. But again, you can see differences, as some vendors are performing assembly tests, part of batch release. Some test components of the assembly only, while others simply state that an assembly has been subject to a pressure hold test. The good news is that if you look at the work being done by groups like BPOG and BPSA, there is a move towards standardization of testing, which would certainly assist users in assessing what these tests mean when they appear on certificate of quality, but also making for a like-for-like comparison of assemblies possible. Ultimately, standardization here will give the end user more confidence in what is being delivered, which leads me to my next poll question, and over to you, Chance.
Excellent, thank you very much again, guys. So this next poll question, you can only pick one option here, so please select the answer that you agree with most, and then press submit to log your response. So who should be setting the standards? Do you think it should be the end user QA departments? Should it be vendors? Should it be regulators? Should it be industry bodies such as BPOG or BPSA? Or do you think it should be all of the above? So again, please select the option that you agree with most and then press submit to log your response. I'd also like to inform you that we do have a brief survey available today and would greatly appreciate any and all feedback on today's webinar, so please complete this before you leave us, and that is located in the dark green survey widget. So I'm just going to give you a few more moments to vote in this poll and then we'll move on to see your thoughts. Okay, thank you very much everyone for responding in the poll. And it does seem that we have quite an even spread again. It's quite close between all of the above and the industry bodies. Guy, what do you make of these results?
I'm not overly surprised, really. I think it's clear that as an industry there needs to be a consensus on this. So it either needs to be led by the industry bodies, the BPOGs, BPSAs, or a combination between, all of the above. We need to make sure that the tests used meet the needs of the end user, but they can also be supported by manufacturers and are acceptable to the regulatory authorities. The role of the single-use supplier is not to tell the end user how to run their process, but to work with them to create a solution based around the best available technology in their toolkit. The end user owns the process, but the vendor should be responsible for the design, build, testing and documentation of an assembly. As the complexity of a system goes up, so will the need for standardization. At the top end, for example, in this case a single-use TFF system, the only piece that should be considered configurable is the connection in and out, while if you look at a simpler unit operation like buffer filtration, standardization of processes and designs would certainly simplify training and inventory control. However, some form of configuration may still be needed, as for example specific lengths of tubing may be required to accommodate the needs of an existing facility. But this should be kept to a minimum of sizes to avoid having to stop multiple assemblies that do fundamentally the same task. Are we anywhere near the ideal situation of being able to standardize assemblies in this way? Well, I would say yes for some of the more complex systems, but if I take a fairly universal unit operation, namely sampling, we will see a different story. By Googling single-use sample assembly, I actually got about 32 million hits and was able to quickly find 10 different example designs. A lot of these are variations on a theme of a smaller sample bag or bottle on a manifold, with a larger flush bag or bottle also attached. But looking at these 10 different assemblies, you can see a multitude of different options, all requiring a level of training on how to use them, and depending on where they are used in the management of stock. Now there is work being led by the PM group in Ireland looking at exactly how simple unit operations like this can be standardized. But as an industry, we are still some way off having a standardized approach. In fact, if I go a level deeper and look at how an assembly is actually put together, as an example of how a piece of tubing is secured onto a barb fitting, we will see just how far we need to go. There are four main ways of sealing a tube onto a barb device. You can use tie wraps, Oettinger clamps, barb locks, or overmolding. Now, the pros and cons are perceived issues based on past customer experience, and certainly there are new tie wraps available that do away with many of the challenges historically associated with them. And equally, easy fit hose barbs are also available. But by working within a configuration-based design space, this should not even be a point of conversation, as the vendor would use the fixture of their choice based on the process requirements, with that choice supported by a validation package. So given the range of designs available for one unit operation and the different ways of sealing a tube onto a hose barb, it raises the question of, is standardization even possible? I would answer yes to that, and I believe history proves it. If we were talking about a stainless steel project, the material most likely would be 316L, which would be supported by a 3.B1 certificate, and connections would be made with a triclover type fitting. In this instance then, time would be spent on making sure the vessel in question is correctly specified for the unit operation and not on the materials of construction and how something is built. And more recently, if you think about that company with 2,000 different assemblies, this was reduced by 80% through a process of standardization. However, in the single-use world, we are still discussing the film and the contact layers and what could and could not be used in a process based on past experience. Well, the last time I looked, there are at least 6 different ways of connecting 2 tubes, which leads to the next question, and back to you, Chance.
Excellent, thank you very much, Guy. So this is now our fourth and final poll question that we will be running in today's session. So the question for you here is, could we get to a position where ULDPE could be regarded in the same way as 316L stainless steel? Do you think yes, it could? Do you think yes, but 10 years down the road from now? Or your final option here is no, never. So please select the option most relevant for you here and then press submit to log your response. We do have a few more slides to go through after this poll question, but please start to send in your questions for the Q&A session at the end, and we'll try and get through as many as we can in the time that we have remaining in the session. Okay, so thank you very much everyone for responding in the poll. Let's move on to view the results. Okay, so over half the audience here think that yes, it is definitely possible. Guy, what do you make of these results?
To me, that's really encouraging. I wasn't expecting such a positive result, so that's really good. And I think the work being done by BPOG should certainly help push this forward. So how can standardization be achieved? If material standardization is still some way off, what could a design space actually look like? It would be a list of key components, tubing, filters, film, connectors, clamps, etc. Now this graphic gives a small indication of the scale involved in that sort of project. Although for clarity there are not 60 different tubing materials, it's only 4, but by the time you incorporate all the different IDODs, you end up with this number of tubing types. Now a design space itself shouldn't be set in stone, it should be dynamic but controlled. Before something can be added to the space, we would need to know or have available the documentation required to support the products in a biopharma process. Equally, if an item is not being used in assemblies, it should fall out of the design space to ensure that the focus is kept on ensuring the quality and supply chain of the materials that are used. The vendor should have audited the supply chain and have supply agreements including change control in place to ensure the long-term availability and quality of parts. They should also have performance data available and know that it can be used in manufacturing. Putting this sort of process in place should allow us to design, test and supply assemblies to our customers quickly and efficiently while allowing for process flexibility. It will also mean that the end user can keep the focus on the process of producing biopharmaceuticals. All this activity, the development of the design space leading to the rapid design and supply of assemblies, will take place in our facility in Birtley, County Durham, UK, with manufacturing taking place in our newly commissioned clean room on the same site. So, if we are moving towards a design space, what does this mean in practice? Well, under the old way of working, a customer has an idea and they speak to a vendor. A sketch is submitted, and around about 2 weeks later, a design drawing is issued. Then each revision can take a further 2 weeks. So even with 2 or 3 drawing revisions, you can start to see how a project can become protracted. Add to that, if samples are required, the timelines can begin to really stretch out. Finally, once a design is agreed and an order placed, finished goods can be anything from 8 to 20 plus weeks. So as a minimum, 12 weeks, or in worst case, an open-ended process, depending on drawing revisions. Now, by putting in place the design space concept we have described today, the drawing and price will be available within 72 hours. Any further drawing revisions would take around 72 hours. Samples could be provided within a week, and finished products in about 8 weeks. So all in all, about 10 weeks in total, resulting in a significant time saving and keeping the focus on where it should be, namely producing products. So what are the advantages and opportunities for standardization? Well, standardization will reduce cycle times and lead to more robust systems, both in use and from a supply chain perspective. For less complex systems, the standardization opportunity lies in the components used, but customization will be required to some extent as different lengths may be needed. But if you take the example of a simple transfer set, regardless of if it's 1 meter or 10 meters, you are still securing a tube onto a bulb fitting and sealing that. So the impact of any customization should be minimal. But again, care should be taken not to create too many different lengths resulting in multiple assemblies for what is basically the same task. Finally, standardization will result in lower costs of goods through quicker implementation of systems, lower training requirements, and better inventory management. So in summary, after 20 years, single use is here to stay. As the industry matures, we need to standardize systems, components, and designs, along with manufacturing and testing methods. The key message I want to get across in all of this is that the process that the processes belong to the end user, while the vendor has responsibility for the design. By standardization, we should free up the end user to concentrate on process development and producing the product, namely life-saving biopharmaceuticals, rather than having to focus on being a design engineer for single-use systems. The way to do this is by the creation of a dynamic design space that allows for the rapid design, testing, and manufacturing of configured solutions. Thank you. I trust you enjoyed this webinar and would now welcome any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Guy. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we're now going to open it up for questions from the audience. We do already have a few in, which we're going to go through now, but please continue to send in your questions and we'll try and get through them all. I'd just like to point out at this point that those two links that you can see on your screen are located in the light green resource list widget, so you can get to them through there. Okay, so over to your questions. The first one we have here for you, Guy, is what happens if something is outside of your design space?
Sure. Well, as an organisation, what we would need to do is look at that item and ask some of the questions that I mentioned in the presentation. So does it have the necessary quality profile? For example, USP Class 6 data, is it gamma stable? Is there a robust supply chain? And probably we'd also ask the question, is there actually an alternative? Now, if we can get all the supporting data we need, and the supply chain we believe is robust, and there is an alternative, then we'd probably look to introduce that into the design space. So the design space will be a dynamic thing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Our second question for you here is, you talked about lower costs. Where do you see those savings coming from?
Sure. I guess mostly it's around time saved. So as you know, speed to market is critical for a lot of biopharmaceuticals. So if you can get to market quicker, then that's going to bring down your cost of goods. Also inventory management. If you've got to manage a stock of 150 different assemblies, that's going to be more involved than managing a stock of, say, 20 or 30 or so. So there's lots of opportunities to lower those costs of goods. It's probably not in the overall purchase price of the assemblies, although there may be some, talking to individual vendors, there may be some opportunities for discount based on sheer volume, but primarily time.
Excellent, thank you very much. Our next question for you here is, what about connections and port assemblies that are patented? How does this allow the end user to easily second source these designs?
That's a really good question, and I think one as an industry we're struggling with, because I think, as I showed in the presentation, there's at least 5 different aseptic connectors out there, each supplied by an individual vendor. I was at a meeting a few months ago where it was, somebody was looking to propose a standard, and of course everyone said, well, here's my standard, you're all welcome to use that. It didn't really create a solution. So as an industry, it's something we need to figure out. The triclover fitting became the industry standard on stainless steel systems many years ago. So I guess, it needs to be led by organisations like the BPSA, BPOG, as we agree what that standard should be. But as yet, we're not there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Guy. Our next question for you here is, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for standardization?
There's probably a couple. One is the actual design of unit operations. If you're looking at sampling, buffer preparation, that's a fairly universal process, and we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel all the time. The other probably is around contact materials. If, as per one of the poll questions, if we could ever get the contact layer film contact layer to be regarded in the same way as 316L stainless steel is regarded, that would be a major win for our industry.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You did speak about minimum quality attributes. Can you clarify what you mean and describe that in a little bit more detail, please?
Sure. So there's, on a certificate of quality that goes out with an assembly, there'll be references to a number of tests, some of which are performed by the vendor in their facility, others are performed by external testing houses. So what you'll be looking for is compatibility, so USP Class 6 data. You'd want to know the material is gamma stable, so it's not going to disintegrate after it's been irradiated. You'd want some performance data, sterility testing. There's any number of tests that are required, but it's really, as we discussed in the presentation, looking to see how those set of tests could be grouped into what is the minimum acceptable to the industry, so what should be on every certificate, and what those tests mean. But probably the compatibility and the safety issue is probably the biggest thing.
Okay, thank you very much. What would you say is the main cost driver in SUS? Could you perhaps give us a top 3 options here?
I guess in terms of what's going to drive down the cost of an assembly, it's numbers. So how many of one? If you can build 100 versus 10, that should bring the overall cost of that assembly down. The standardization piece is critical. If you can stay within a design space that a vendor is used to working in, so they haven't got to go out and source custom parts, that will help drive down costs. And then it's probably planning. If you have a steady demand for an item, it's easier for a vendor to make a certain number of those and either stock them as irradiated or non-irradiated but finished goods than it is to make 10, make another 10, make another 10. So standardization, planning, and I've lost the third one, but as discussed. So I think that's what the question was. If the question was what's going to drive down the cost of single use, it's the quantity, the standardization, and planning.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your response there, Guy. So moving on to our next question, is the production of Domnick Hunter's SUS now in the UK, or is it still in the US for the European market?
Sure. So Domnick Hunter, we're in the process of commissioning a clean room here in Berkeley. So temporarily it's in the US, but as of a couple of weeks' time, we have our first order going into that facility. So it's in the UK, and will be going forward.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Why, as an end user, would I limit myself to your design space when I could develop an assembly with any number of vendors?
Good question. I mean, it really comes down to speed and cost. By staying in that design space, we can follow that flow chart that I put up towards the end of the presentation, where a drawing can be prepared within a known time frame, samples can be supplied for form and fit testing relatively quickly, and then the actual material itself can be supplied within 8 weeks. If you go outside of that design space, then in terms of getting the supply of the material, samples, and everything else, it can be an open-ended process. So assurance that you're going to get material on time, assurance that the system itself is going to work, and assurance that it can be supplied today, tomorrow, and 10 years' time.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We do have a little bit of a follow-up question to a question we had a moment ago. It just asks, are you going to be continuing to manufacture from your US facility?
Absolutely. What we will have there is dual manufacturing. So as our customers speak to us about continuity of supply, business continuity, it's a real powerful offering to be able to say, well, actually, we've got manufacturing in Europe and in the US. So yes, but both Berkeley and Oxnard will be maintained producing single-use systems.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So I think that's all the questions that we're going to go through in today's webinar. So thank you to everyone that sent in your questions. If we didn't get around to answering it in today's session, we will forward them on to both Guy and Parker Domnick Hunter, and you will receive a response in due course. Before I formally bring a close to today's session, Guy, do you have any final closing thoughts or comments you wish to share with everyone?
Thank you, Chance. Yes, I do. I mean, I hope everybody enjoyed this webinar. I mean, to me, it's clear that single-use technology has been a powerful driver in biomanufacturing. However, to keep going forward, we do need to create more robust solutions which are supported by a strong supply chain. I believe that to do this, we need to standardize, and the first step towards that is the creation of the design space that we spoke about today. We would also, if you would like to comment or feedback on this subject or any others, you're welcome to go to our LinkedIn site, our LinkedIn page, and do that. And really, just to finally say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
So that just leaves me to thank Guy for what was a great presentation. Thanks as well to Parker Domnick Hunter for sponsoring the session, and also a big thank you to everyone in attendance today. As Guy just mentioned, there is a link to the Parker Domnick Hunter LinkedIn page, which is located in the light green resource list widget, so click on that now to visit that page. We would also greatly appreciate your feedback on today's webinar, so please complete today's survey, which will appear on screen once this webinar ends. You will also receive an email tomorrow telling you how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar, or you can access this through our website, which is www.business-review-webinars.com. Please continue to ask your questions, vote in the polls, and interact with all of the widgets as the on-demand version remains fully interactive. We look forward to sharing further webinars with you, so please do keep an eye out on our website and follow us on Twitter @BRWebinars for daily updates, and join our LinkedIn group, Business Review Webinars. Thank you once again, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.